Hi, everybody. We're talking about the Ottoman Empire today, and we're going to talk about how they gain power, consolidate power, and maintain power. Um, so, first, I like to start with a little background just to show you that they didn't just come out of nowhere. They're actually an ethnic group called Turks or Turkic group from the Asian steppe. That's like a big plain, like we think about our Midwest, like Kansas, stuff like that, where it's a lot of grass but no trees. Same thing there, except this one, if you see in this little picture here, basically goes from Eastern Europe all the way to almost the Pacific Ocean. So it's huge. It's usually very dry and hot in the summers and very cold in the winter. So if you live there, it's hard and makes tough people. Happens all the time, and it's also the same place a lot of these nomadic horsemen come from. That means they move around a lot, nomad. They don't stay in one place. They don't really have cities, and they use their horses to get around. It's a big thing for those communities. I mean, still is today. Um, Now, the Turks were around this area around here originally, and they came in contact with the Islamic world. So they eventually did convert to Islam. They got pushed to Anatolia, aka Turkey, this area, by the Mongols. Yeah, those Mongols still there. Um, People don't realize how much of an effect the Mongols had. It. I mean, you have this great empire that started because they got pushed out from the Mongols. So that's just a little bit of background, just to give you an idea of who these people are. And you can see here, this is like the Mongol Empire. So think about, the Turks around here, and they get pushed out, so they're going to go east and go into here into Turkey, Anatolia. Uh, they consider themselves Ghazis, and these were like religious warriors, is what they thought of themselves. So you had a lot of these Ghazis around, like they're almost like tribes with a leader, and they're called a vizier. Um, and one specific of these like tribes was led by Osman. And eventually he goes and either through alliance and defeating their rivals, he becomes a sultan, or his descendants become sultans. That means like supreme leader. So he's the leader of all these people now. Um, Also in the same area, they had um, another empire that was crumbling, was going away. It was the Byzantine Empire, which actually, in a roundabout way, it's still the Roman Empire we're talking about. Let's say changed, but they've been there forever. It used to be the most powerful empire in that area. Wealthy, also, they sat right in the middle of the Silk Road where it ends right before it goes into Europe. So they're very important. Um, and so eventually the Ottomans get powerful enough that they start trying to take the capital and taking these lands from the Byzantine Empire. They were going to try to take Constantinople, which was the biggest city before. Now it had starting to shrink some, but it was still a very important city. Um, they weren't able to capture it, but they did capture the second most important city, Adrianople, in the 1360s. And then eventually, uh, they did capture Constantinople. Now, this was a really big blow. The empire ended after that, and this is like the crowning achievement of the Ottoman Empire at that point. Um, and they were actually one of the first people to actually use gunpowder like we would think of today for warfare. So when they did take Constantinople, they had, they used cannons, which some of these cannons were uh, 26 feet long and would shoot 1,200-pound boulders. And now that's important because the city was surrounded by a wall. that basically stood for 800 years. I mean, it was actually 2 walls, 4 miles long, had a moat, and up to 60 feet tall and 15 feet thick. So, like a normal catapult or trebuchet, a little thing that throws rocks, not going to break through. But the use of these cannons were able to blow holes through there, but not big enough to use it. Actually, what ended up happening was ingenuity of these Ottomans. They had a navy here, and there was a chain blocking them from getting into here where it was easier to attack. Well, easy way to fix that, go and actually haul your whole navy over land and bring them into here, and you're able to attack. So that's how they actually ended up capturing Constantinople. And they actually made that their capital, and it's still there today. It's called Istanbul. But yeah, with gunpowder, they use that very effectively, and they even use muskets and stuff. Instead of having their horsemen who were archers, they switched to being more of gunpowder and muskets and stuff like that. So they were technologically, superior. They use something called janissaries also for consolidating, maintaining power. This will think of it here as put down to that section. Janissaries were actually Christian boys who either were taken or given. Actually, some parents actually volunteered these Christian boys to be educated. They got converted to Islam and they got trained to be soldiers. And they're a military force. Well, they only answered to the Sultan, and they're basically slaves, but not like the slaves we think of who, had to labor in the fields, stuff like that. They were paid also. They were the most well-paid soldiers in that part of the world, paid more than anybody else. And they answered only the Sultan. So that's how you gain power. Like you have at least 30,000 of them. At times that answered only to you. They also went on a building spree, constructing fortresses. So their empire was growing. It's easier to have control of an area if you have a fort nearby. You have some of your soldiers there. Everybody stays in line. You project your power. But on top of that, they built mosques. Improve everybody's situation. They didn't have to travel as far. They had better mosque. Also schools that improved learning. They built roads, made a network of roads. Now, if you have a big empire, if there's something happening on one far side of the empire, it's easier to get there if you use roads. If not, it's going to take you a while. So if there is any problem at all, you go and squash it really quickly if you use those roads. Another thing that also helped them consolidate and maintain power was they kept on going. They didn't stop at their prize jewel, Constantinople. They kept on going. They captured parts of what would be today the Saudi Arabia, Egypt, North Africa, into Europe more, almost all the way into what we talked about before, the Holy Roman Empire, to a city called Vienna. So they did that. Iraq, parts of Persia, they spread pretty well. And that just adds to your power or the image of power you have. And also the treatment of the conquered. We'll talk about this a little bit more in depth later, but generally, compared to some people, whenever they conquered, they were a lot better. They weren't as mean. They weren't going to kill everybody or make them slaves. They usually tried to bring them into the empire with them. And we can talk about probably the most important sultan of the Ottoman Empire was Suleiman the Magnificent, as he's known to us in the West, or to the people in the Arabic world, or Turkish, the Ottoman Empire. He was Suleiman the Lawgiver. He helped make the laws more complete and sort of just rewrite all the laws before, because maybe it was a little different from place to place. So he made it one law that everybody had to follow, even if you're a sultan or down to a slave. So you use Sharia law. That's the law that Islam people, if you've practiced Islam, would have to follow. It's sort of like religious law. They have to follow that. But he also did civil law, which is between two people, and criminal law, that's if you break commit a crime. So he covered all the law, and he's so influential that in the U.S. Capitol building, they have sort of the names and portraits of some of the best lawgivers of all time. So, like, they have a portrait of Thomas Jefferson, they have one of Moses, and they have one of Solomon also. Um, that just shows how much of effect his laws had. Um, that they were fair and just for everybody. He also, just to touch on a little bit, he created a government that was efficient, ran a lot better, was merit based, which means is based not on who your parents were, but how good you were. Um, he also helped do these things called millets, religious minorities, so Christian, Jews, other smaller religions. They could practice their faith freely, um, and they didn't have to worry. They're allowed to do that. They could like rule themselves a little bit. Have their own laws, specifically how Sharia laws for Islam. Well, maybe the Jewish religion has special laws for them. They could still practice that. Now, one thing they did, they made it fair also to say, hey, if you're a Muslim, you don't have to pay taxes, but you had to serve in the military. Minorities like Christians, Jews, other people didn't have to serve, but they had to pay taxes. So that seems like a fair trade. You don't have to do one, but you do the other, and vice versa for the other group. Generally, all this helped improve the life of everybody within the empire. And if you have happy citizens in your empire, you're going to consolidate, keep that power, and then keep that power. Get it and keep it from making everybody happy. Now, let's not say he wasn't like, he wasn't, do bad things. He didn't do. There's times, whenever he had some of his janissaries, there's stories of him going and killing some important janissaries because they did something, bad. So, I mean, he wasn't all, perfect. He was ruthless at times. So, Suleiman, magnificent, important character for the Ottomans. He's almost like, you almost think like a Abraham Lincoln or something like that for us. Here's the Ottoman Empire, and here's where they started. This little bit right here. And then by almost the time of Suleiman, they had most of this that you see in green, this is Africa, Asia, and Europe. And they were a big player in the world because look the size of their empire. They're the biggest Muslim empire, and we'll talk about later is the Silk Road that we talked about, even the Black Death. It comes and ends through here. So if you wanted to get stuff from the Silk Road to Europe, you had to go through these people. So major player, they rose quickly and maintained and consolidated their power. That was just giving you a little idea about the Ottoman Empire. This won't be the last time we hear of them. They're going to be around till at least World War I, guys. So we will definitely talk about them again. Have a good day.